ignore or they cannot neglect India when it comes to the trade between the two countries. So it cannot be the case that just imposing hefty duties will serve the purpose. And that is the reason that seeking this particular aspect, India is having, the discussion is quite on from both the sides.
All right, Sameer, appreciate you putting that into context as well once again for our viewers. But stay with us on the show. I'm going to try and come back to you. Sumita, on a lighter note, stay with me as well as far as we've been patient with what we're looking at in terms of the tariff deal as well. But before, Sumita, I come back to you, let me take that across to Ambassador Meera. Ambassador Meera, how are you essentially looking at this at the moment? What do you make of it? And more importantly, at the end of the day, the bigger question over here, who is US to really decide a timeline, pressure or policy?
Well, I think the US has, they're not really offering us any carrots, at least from what I see in the newspapers. They're basically holding out a stick and saying, if you open up your market, we won't use the stick. So that is really the basis of discussion so far. So from India's point of view, I think if we have to open up sectors which are considered socially and politically and economically sensitive and get nothing in return except a 10% baseline tariff, then I think it's not really something which would work for us, because no trade deal can be complete unless there is something in it for both sides. So whether the two countries are able to reach that sweet spot remains to be seen, because there are still some days left for the deadline when Trump proposes to impose reciprocal tariffs. And for India, he says it'll be 26%. So I think we have to wait and see. Clearly, the US is a big market for us. And also a key partner in the high-tech sector. Most of our exports go to the US in the IT and software services sector. So we would also like to finalize a trade deal with the US, but it can't be something which is one-sided. And the US has to understand that India has large sections of the people, 50% of the population, who are still dependent on agriculture, and this is subsistence agriculture. We don't compete with them. We hardly export agricultural products. So it's not that we are undercutting their market share elsewhere. For most of our farmers, it's a question of survival. So if this is in some way jeopardized or made vulnerable, there would be high social, political, and economic costs for India, which won't be in the US interest either, because if the Indian economy isn't healthy, then imports per se will start diminishing, and shrinking. So I wouldn't yet feel that there's no chance, but certainly it's not an easy task. I think the initial signaling from our side was a bit too soft.
Interjecting you there at the moment, given the fact that India has been measured in its statements, till now, but why do you think the strong statement has come at this particular moment? What do you make of that?
I think to signal that we have a resolve on this issue, and also it's responding to, anxieties and fears expressed by different sections of the people, by different political parties, including sections of the RSS and so on. So I think it's responding to political and social opinion within India, and it's signaling to the US our resolve, that we can't just be a pushover under the threat that you will impose tariffs. So I think that it's, of course, it's right at the end. I think we've already opened up Starlink. We have also reduced duties on Harley Davidson. We've done many things unilaterally, which is never a good thing with the US because it's just pocketed and then the goalpost is moved. You always have to negotiate, give and take, and dot the I's and cross the T's. Never give anything, on the basis of goodwill. It doesn't work that way with the US. So I'm glad that right now we have made our position clear.
All right, Ambassador Meera, as you point that out, given the timing of that particular comment, stay with me. I'm going to come back to you. Let me get in a quick word from Sumita as well. Sumita, given the aspect that while you have been keeping us ahead with the developments, the other significant aspect that we've seen is with the Vietnam deal with the US. The bigger picture here, India emerging as a confident global voice and not like how Vietnam gave in, because that is essentially another aspect that you were putting into perspective earlier.
Yes, absolutely, Nivedana. That's a very, very significant perspective, and this is something that we've had conversations about with several geopolitical experts as well on how Vietnam, for instance, which essentially, like many experts say, not my words, is essentially a territory for Chinese exports to come in, and that's because it has taken advantage of that. So definitely, that is being seen in that light that Vietnam has given a lot of access to the United States with respect to this last-minute deal is concerned. The United States has not been able to sign a very, very significant deal with the United Kingdom. And of course, with China, we've seen differences have emerged, even though there was an interim trade deal, during this period, this 90-day relief period that was announced by Donald Trump administration. However, differences emerged on both the sides with respect to immigration, with respect to, universities in the United States, visa-related issues. And of course, there were issues on rare earth exports from the side of the Chinese side. And of course, China has now promised that, there will be no stoppage. However, there is a time period that's been given by China with respect to lifting curbs on these exports of rare earth materials, which is essentially 6 months. So definitely, this deal is very, very significant. The India-US deal is going to be very significant for the United States because, like Ma'am was also stating, there is a lot of political posturing that's happening from the Indian side, from the side of Donald Trump administration, because remember, this is one policy amongst many others, including the policy on war, that he's going to stop the war. Within days, the Russia-Ukraine war, that hasn't really happened. Of course, the Middle East war, there is some sort of a truce that's been arrived at between Israel and Iran. But what really happens to the overall Middle East situation with respect to Gaza and, Israel, those are still, sort of hanging by a very, very thin thread. So those are some challenges that are emerging on Donald Trump's promises. So this one definitely is a big one for him if the United States is able to strike a good deal with India because of the fact that this has been one of the key promises that he said that he is going to he is going to tax other countries and he's not going to tax Americans, and this is essentially why that big beautiful bill he has been promoting. And of course, there's been voting that has happened on that front as well. But how much of this is of course appealing to his MAGA base, but how much of the trade deficit that he's going to bridge with this deal, that remains to be seen. Another very significant point is the fact that if India really agrees to put curbs on United States with respect to entry into its agri sector or dairy sector, or if it's not going to have any compromises on the auto sector, does it mean that it's going to have in the first tranche of the bilateral trade agreement, does it mean that these topics will come up? If these topics are not going to come up in the next few days, essentially, which is when, there are expectations that perhaps a deal will be stitched, at least that's what's been communicated from the side of the United States. So all of these factors are quite significant to note at this point in time. And how much will India relent? That remains the big question.